everyone, and welcome to the County Buzz. I'm your host today, Dick Wolf. Some time ago, 1990s or so, I moved to this wonderful community, and one of the first persons I met was named Jan Tavelin. He's our guest this morning, and who knows what he's going to say, but I'm looking forward to it, and I think you will too. We'll be right back. Whatever your shipping needs, Mr. Postman is where you want to go. Convenient across from the post office in Winchester. Take your packages or bring the item unpacked and they'll carefully box it and send it off for safe delivery. Anywhere. Yes, in or out of the USA, Mr. Postman can get it there quickly. There's more. Get a box number with a street address. Start a background check with safe and secure fingerprinting. Oh, wait, forgot that card to go with that present? Not a problem. A good selection of cards, funny, faithful, and family. Mr. Postman, across from the post office, Winchester. Hello, everyone, and welcome back. As I said, our guest is Jan Tavelin, sitting here beside me. Good morning, Jan.
Good morning, Dick, and glad to be on your show today. Going to describe a career that goes back to the early 1960s, a different generation, a different time, and carries right through January of this year when I finally retired.
A man with a sense of history. But, well, I don't know where you want to begin in this story, Jan. You and I began in the early 90s. You were at the Herald Chronicle and the big sports guy as well as a news reporter. So where do you want to start the story?
Starting it at the beginning, it doesn't tell much and can be more or less wrapped up in a matter of minutes. I got a part-time job at WKDA AM in Nashville in 1960. Collecting scores of ball games and typing them out and putting them to the announcer to read on the air. I gradually got more responsibilities, and then in 1962, I believe it was, that I started doing beeper reports. That's telephone reports of individual ball games, and at the same time, we'd give a scoreboard every so often to keep everyone up to breast, mainly of high school activity.
So did you make a lot of money in those days?
I believe I made $10 a week. But I got a wealth of experience.
So this was in New England?
No, this was in Nashville.
In Nashville?
WKDA in Nashville. I was living in Nashville since I was about 15 years of age. Went to Hillsborough High School and graduated. Went to Middle Tennessee State University and graduated. One story that came upon me at WKDA involving Middle Tennessee was a tragedy that made national headlines. Ray Neal was a defensive end who started for Middle Tennessee after transferring from the University of Tennessee. He got caught in a snowstorm in Nashville one night, and rather than risk the drive back to Murfreesboro in the driving snow, he decided to stay at his girlfriend's house. Well, they were in the guest house together when about 3 or 4 in the morning, Mama comes in, sees them together, and nobody to this day knows exactly what happened, but a gun was discharged. Ray Neal fell dead. We got the story from a police officer who wanted to get the tip of the week, put it on the air before word got around, and all hell broke loose the next day because we had put the story across before the public relations department of the police department had released it. But
so you've made something of a habit of beating other guys. You're still pretty competitive, aren't you?
Yes, because the thing is this: when a police officer, no matter who he is, gives a story over the phone that you're taping and putting on the air, that's legitimate. It's his fault if he beat the gun.
Yeah. Well, before we go on, Jan, you're a little bit bent, and why don't you tell our viewers what your ailments are at this advanced stage, so they'll understand why it is you're bent over a little bit.
I don't know if that's the reason I'm bent, but I have had Parkinson's disease now for about 2.5, 3 years, which caused, I wouldn't say an early retirement, because I'm going to be 75 years of age this month, but it did push me into retirement.
And this month's birthday, that would be March 25th.
Right.
So if you want to send Jan a birthday card, you can send it to him at our Franklin County Buzz address. So okay, so go on. So you're working in Nashville, and you finally got your reporting job at $10 a week. Then what?
Well, I stumbled into a piece of history. Nashville and the rest of the South was undergoing integration. and it's something that you couldn't get away from. It was in everyone's mind most of the time. We were worried about violence. In Nashville, there was no real violence to speak of. A couple of rocks were thrown, and some angry words were exchanged, but generally speaking, it was a peaceful integration. I had a couple of back seats to it. In one case, they had brought a new baseball team into Nashville that year. It wasn't the Sounds, it was the predecessors. I believe the Nashville Vols came back for one season, and we had a big opening day. I had no trouble getting in. I had a seat at the press box, but a friend of mine who worked for WVOL, and he was black, was very apprehensive about going to the ball game and sitting in the press box or even getting in. So I said, just follow me, and I led Reggie Stewart into the game. I said, I'm Jan Tavelin from WKDA, and this is Reggie Stewart from WVOL. Come on, Reggie.
And did they give you any trouble?
No trouble at all. Reggie Stewart made it a little bit better in his career than I did. He went on to be bureau chief of the Washington Bureau of the New York Times. So he had some big things ahead of him. But back then, he was a student reporter for Pearl High School and a heck of a nice guy and a good friend.
So that was your brush with the integration.
Oh, no. There was two other brushes.
More.
Two other brushes. They had a situation where Father Ryan had some black students, but they weren't allowed to play because they were black, and the state association at the time insisted only on white teams, white players competing on the same court. Willie Brown was an outstanding sandlot player who went to Father Ryan and had no intention of transferring, but prior to his junior year, the Archbishop and the headmaster got together and told the TSSAA, the Tennessee Secondary School Association, they were going to play Willie Brown. He had a right to play. He was in good standing academically, and the federal law said he cannot be refused the right to play, and they put Willie Brown on the court. I was at the game down at Fog when Willie Brown tore up a team single-handedly. I think he scored 36 points. Led the team in rebounds. He just tore the Fog team to pieces. And that was the beginning of a good career for Willie Brown. He became a good friend of mine. He appreciated the coverage I gave him where some other players did not. And he went on to play college ball starting at Middle Tennessee State. Unfortunately, when he graduated and went into law enforcement, he was a state trooper at the Connecticut State Police Barracks. He was pursuing a fugitive from justice on a motorcycle. His motorcycle crashed and he was killed. Very, very sad day, but for a great player. Willie Brown was truly the Jackie Robinson of Tennessee.
No, that's so that's two, and you say you have one more.
Anybody who saw the Pearl team play in the mid-1960s could only wonder if this was a high school team. The statement, all men are created equal, did not apply to Pearl on the basketball court. There wasn't another team in Tennessee that year that could hold a candle to Pearl High's team. They had a team that had three boys play either professional or major college ball. Perry Wallace, good friend of mine, by the way, captained his Vanderbilt basketball team. Ted McClain, a guard who could walk on air practically, went to play for the Carolina Cougars. James Douglas was the third one. He started 4 years for Memphis State. The other two starters were Willie Fisher and a boy by the name of Parham, who alternated that position. They did not get beaten that year. The only team that gave them a tussle was Father Ryan, of course, with Willie Brown scoring about 40 points. It was just a great team. I haven't seen anything to match it in the years I covered basketball on the high school level.
So was basketball your favorite sport to cover? You've got quite a few stories about baseball, too, as I remember.
Yes, baseball, yes, and football. Football, Franklin County, of course, had some very, very outstanding teams back in the 1990s, 1980s. Some outstanding players. I wouldn't want to mention too many of them that went to college because I missed some went out, but just to hit on a few of them. Jeremy Nunley starting at end for Alabama, and Troy Horton, a 2-year starter at quarterback for Franklin County. Tracy Hayworth, of course, starting 3 years at either running back or defensive end for Franklin County. And the list goes on and on and on. Huntland, they came in clans, the Reeds, the Van Zants at Franklin County and Huntland. Just so many players, how could you miss? One that stood out, though, in my mind was Freddie Simmons. Freddie was just plain tough and quick, and getting around his end was almost impossible. He, at times, would overshadow the other end, a guy named Tracy Hayworth. Hayworth got all the ink, but if anybody who had Freddie Simmons on his tail would have preferred to have a fox chasing him. He was that quick and that tough.
So in a professional career, did he have one?
Unfortunately, no. I believe he went to junior college, but I don't know the details there. Some student athletes in high school did not have the makeup to play college ball or the discipline. Some of them just didn't have the grades. There were many factors involved then and now. But Franklin County certainly had a share of outstanding players. Jeff Hall, an outstanding place kicker who later kicked the winning field goal in a bowl that Tennessee was involved in Florida. I don't remember who it was that they were playing at the time. I think it was Florida State. But that comes to mind because that was the last-second field goal that won the game.
And so you were in sports for many years, and then when we met, you were also doing news. So how did you make that transition?
Well, I went to a couple of small radio stations where they had one person doing all of the news. Got my feet wet that way. Then went on and covered news and news exclusively at WBRK in the Berkshires in New York State. And that's when I started a new branch of my talents, interviewing candidates for president.
Well, you should be busy this time of year with that, but who all did you interview?
A guy by the name of Teddy Kennedy, for instance, who at the time was considered a possibility, and I brought it right to him. I wasn't going to mess around. I said, Senator, there's a rumor going around that Massachusetts may have the next president of the United States. Is there any truth to this? And he said, I didn't know Ed Brooke was going to run. Ed Brooke being the other. Then another one that I interviewed, Ronald Reagan. And interviewing Ronald Reagan for president was just like following a script in a play. He was an actor, always an actor.
And Jimmy Carter.
We'll get to him in a second. Jimmy Carter was the one that I kept waiting. He had a 12:45 appointment for an interview, yours truly providing the interview. I was having my New England boiled dinner across the street at Pucci's, and a man came over from the Secret Service, said, Mr. Carter is ready to interview you for the interview by now. And I said, excuse me, I'm having my lunch. I'll be over as soon as I finish. He apologized for being early, but said that really the crowds weren't as thick as he expected. Very good interviewee, very polite, very nice. The kind of a guy you want as your neighbor. And we had a good interview.
All right. Well, we're talking with Jan Tavelin here, and we'll be back with more of Jan in just a minute.
When it comes to furniture, appliances, electronics, and yard equipment, start with a company you can trust. Badcock Home Furniture and More in Winchester has spent years faithfully serving their community and their customers. Badcock Furniture has always been ahead of the rest when it comes to brand name furniture, appliances, and electronics. That's why Badcock is the best. Badcock continues to renovate their store plan with new top-of-the-line quality products that fit your taste and budget and make your life at home easier than ever. Upgrade your appliances today. Ranges, fridges, freezers, refrigerators, microwaves, vacuums, and stay comfortable through the years with air conditioners and infrared quartz fireplace heaters in several sizes and designs. Live healthy and sleep better with iComfort Sleep Systems by Serta, plus sleep accessories, support systems, and foundations from other major brands. Badcock carries state-of-the-art entertainment equipment, TVs, DVD players, home theaters, computers, tablets, printers, and more, and financing is available. Visit Gregor K. Gillum and the staff at Badcock Home Furniture and More today. 405 Bypass Road in Winchester. Call 931-962-4991. We make it easy. We deliver. Badcock Home Furniture and More in Winchester.
Welcome back, everyone, to the County Buzz. Our guest this morning is Jan Tavelin. Hello again, Jan. And you've told us a little bit about your beginning of your career and even interviewing some potential presidents. Tell us about some of the other folks you've met in your career and where your career has led you.
Two of them particularly stand out, one in New Hampshire and one in Massachusetts, and then some others in the Franklin County, Grundy County area. Gene Daniel, I don't think anybody remembers the name, but Gene Daniel was born a Republican through his middle years, then joined the Communist Party, became a socialist, and ended up as a Democrat. Along the way, he ran twice for president, once on the socialist ticket and the other time on the Workers' Party ticket. Of course, he didn't get anywhere, but he was a kind of a guy that he was God at his hometown, which was Franklin, New Hampshire. At one point, when I arrived at Franklin, he was the mayor, he was the state representative, and he was the school board chairman. And he was about to step down as mayor, and he liked me for some reason. I'd only been there a few days. He came up to me and said, "I'm going to give you a scoop that nobody else has. I'm not going to run for re-election." Gene Daniel, a heck of a nice guy, and really, he was a little bit on the flaky side, but he was something special. You just had to like the guy. Mary Murphy was in an opposite situation. She was elected to the city council in Pittsfield, Massachusetts, because she had an electable name, but her bloodline told something different. Her father was a Sherman, a direct descendant of the Shermans that burned down Atlanta. Her mother was a Brewster, direct descendant of the man who led the Pilgrims over on the Mayflower. Mary Murphy killed herself politically by turning woman's lib against the local winter carnival. They had a winter carnival at most of these places in New England at the time, and the one in Pittsfield, Massachusetts, was particularly well patronized. Mary Murphy did not like it. She did not like the Queen's contest, and she said, and I quote, "If we're going to exploit these dear little darlings, we may well start a brothel." That didn't go over very well.
Speaking of getting over, Jan, you tend to kind of bend down as you talk. If you could, people want to see that face of yours.
There was another situation too, where in New Hampshire and other places around, in Massachusetts, the mafia is always present, and the mafia is not a collection of gangsters. Some of them are gangsters, some of them are respectable businessmen. You do not join the mafia as a whole. If you're born into it, and if you're born into it, you're there. You don't get out. If you're not born into it, the best you can be is a paid consultant. I was asked to do a little favor for the mafia on a couple of occasions. One time I had a jacket which I took with me on a trip to Europe, and the jacket had its inside camera which went through the coating and took pictures. To trigger the camera, you had to scratch your neck in a certain place. I went behind the Iron Curtain and took some pictures. I don't know what they did with them. I don't know if I was working for the mafia or the CIA or who, or maybe James Bond, but nevertheless, it was an experience.
And so they gave you that jacket.
No, I had to give it back when I got back, but I was given a better jacket without the photographic equipment. We had another situation happen with the mafia. I was living up in New Hampshire, at Franklin, New Hampshire, and we had a boy named Brian Pelletier who was a gifted athlete. He could hit Bob Tewksbury, the future major leaguer, better than anybody could with some to spare. He was a no-miss baseball player, but he was also on drugs. and he was dealing in drugs. And the police caught him finally, and they agreed to be easy on him if he were to provide them information leading to the suppliers. He was found dead in 3 inches of water the next day. I got a call from the mafia in Massachusetts. Jan, how are you doing? We need a favor. I want you to tell everybody in New Hampshire we didn't have anything to do with Brian's death. We don't act that way. It was the Colombians.
So they called you up.
Right.
Did they ever ask you to do something that you said no to them?
That was the last request they made of me. Most of them, though, were very polite to me most of the time. When I came back from Europe, I had about 25 cents to my name. And the local godfather got me a dinner over at the local Italian restaurant. They could be very nice people if they wanted to be, as long as you didn't cross them. And you know, this is another thing. I came to Grundy County, and it was a similar situation there between the, shall we say, the unlawful individuals and the mafia.
And I know you're not going to mention names, but tell me the story.
Well, there's one name I could mention here because, in fact, a couple of names could be mentioned. David Van Hoosier, otherwise known as Shoggs, was a very controversial figure. A lot of people were afraid of him. A lot of people wouldn't come within 10 feet of him. He and I got to be friends in an interesting way. As far as I knew, Shoggs Van Hoosier had only 2 problems, and that was pills and moonshine liquor. I never knew him to do anything else, but I'm sure he was involved in other things, but he was a friend. One day he got pilled up and liquored up, and he could hardly walk out the door of the Oak Terrace in Monteagle. He got in his pickup truck and somehow managed to get out of the parking lot and head home. I got in my car and followed him home to make sure he made it. And if he didn't make it, I would be the first to call for help. He never forgot that. The man, every time I would see him, he thanked me again for following him home and showing that much interest in him. I just thought it was a neighborly thing to do. He died of leukemia, by the way, several years ago. And I understand he wanted to see me before he died, but there just wasn't time. Another situation happened in Palma. Kinley Campbell was the mayor there, and he didn't like the press interfering with his operations of the town. They were supposed to discuss a grant that had not been put in the budget. And what happened? I decided I had to cover that meeting. Kinley Campbell sent word that if I went to Palma that night, they'd blow up my car. So I rented a bicycle and headed up from Tracy City to Palma. The word had gotten around and people lined the street. You thought it was a Thanksgiving Day parade. I made it all the way to Palma, and at that point, one of the attorneys from Jasper, one of the Graham family, gave me a ride home. They didn't think I ought to challenge the elements any further. But,
but you managed to cover the meeting.
Well, yes. There was another meeting on which I wasn't so lucky. It was in Tilton, New Hampshire. Again, they had a Bureau of Outdoor Recreation grant that was not put in the budget, and they called an executive session during the meeting to discuss what to do with the money. I refused to leave the meeting. When a policeman ordered me to leave, I refused to leave and got jailed for disorderly conduct. This was appealed. The American Civil Liberties Union gave me a top-right attorney, and the whole thing was thrown out of court. I had some other interesting experiences as well. When I was in Europe, I was held up by the border guards at the checkpoint Charlie in East Berlin. What had happened was I tried to take a picture of the border guards, and they don't like their picture taken for some reason. And the guy raised his gun and aimed it at me, and I had to go through the 3rd degree. I had another situation happen to me in Ireland where I was brought in for taking a picture of Mountjoy jail where they killed Kevin Barry in the, I guess, 1912 or 14 revolt. And it's a tourist attraction, but you're not supposed to take pictures of it. I had a couple of occasions where I was mugged in the Philippines.
In the Philippines?
In the Philippines. got some cameras stolen. I was also attacked by guerrillas, Muslim guerrillas, I believe, in Malaysia. And the guy wasn't as big as I am. And I thought I'd be able to hold my own against him. But while I was giving kicks with the feet and the hands, a couple of people with machine guns pointed them at me. And it was obvious that I would have to lose that fight.
So what did they do with you?
Oh, they called the tourist bureau to take me away and get me out of the country. You can't have any bad publicity about a good anti-communist country like Malaysia.
Is that the only country you've been thrown out of?
Oh no, I got thrown out of Northern Ireland for taking pictures. The British did not like me taking pictures of the ruins of Londonderry. And it was almost all in ruins. So they started giving me the third degree about it. But the word had been passed by the IRA, which is very pro-American, that I was going to be in Londonderry and to keep an eye on me. And as soon as the British started giving me trouble, one of the members of the IRA started creating a disturbance. Oh, the Brits are picking on the tourists now. They're giving hassle to the tourists. They're trying to ruin the tourist trade in Northern Ireland, et cetera, et cetera. So immediately the British decided they'd put me on the first bus out of the country as long as I didn't come back for 20 years.
So, well, that 20 years ought to be up. You have any desire to go back to Ireland?
I've been to Ireland 8 times. It's a beautiful country. I had a situation in the Philippines where I took a picture of a resort, and one of the people in the picture apparently was a drug lord, and they called a hitman to follow me around to make sure I didn't do anything unwarranted. He followed me all the way to the plane the next day when I left.
I've got to ask you, Jan, have any of these stories been told in the column that you did for the Herald Chronicle, Tavelin's Tales?
A few of them.
A few of them?
A few of them. One other thing, are we running short on time?
No, but I'd like to see your face a little more.
Okay. I'm going to save that one for last.
Okay.
I'll tell you one person that I met I ought to be given mention, Robert Carr. He was the police chief in Tracy City. No, not Tracy City. He was the police chief in Harper's Ferry. Robert Carr was black. The town in which they hung John Brown had hired a black police officer, but he wasn't just a black man. He was 6'6", weighed about 215 pounds, looked like he could play pro football, maybe tight end at that very moment. He would walk into a place where some people were getting ruly, and he would just stand there, and all of a sudden things would shape up and it'd get deadly quiet. And if he said anything, it would be like this: "Hawk, your wife is lonely. It's time for you to go home." And no one said anything except, "Yes, sir." Robert Carr was a heck of a guy. He also sung That Lucky Old Sun better than Ray Charles. And one time, yours truly joined in on it. And my career in the arts was not that notable, but I did have two particular cases. One, when I was in Northern Ireland, the lead singer for the group didn't show up, and they drafted me to sing South of the Border, Down Mexico Way. It sounded a lot better than that. God was with me that time, but I made it through the song. Then there was the case where they reenacted The Devil and Daniel Webster, updating it in Franklin, New Hampshire, and they couldn't find anybody willing to or able to play the devil. So guess who volunteered?
Jan Tavelin did.
And it sounded like this: Daniel, you called me. You called me. I'm here to serve you. Just for one little thing, Daniel, your soul.
Jan, we're about out of time, so you've got one more anecdote, and then I'm going to thank you for being here. So, have you got another story in that notebook of yours to tell?
Yes. I did some mountain climbing when I was in New Hampshire. Climbed Mount Washington 8 times from 4 different directions. Climbed Mount Lafayette in the middle of winter, when the top mile was nothing but ice and congealed snow and slippery as the devil. But the most precarious climb I made was on Whiteface Mountain. It was part of a tour which you could climb 3 mountain peaks in one day. I climbed the 2 without any difficulty and didn't have much of a climb to go on the top of Whiteface Mountain, but it was getting dark, and I figured I better get down. I could not find the trail down, looked all over. This was the middle of summer, but it was cold, getting cold already, and as I headed towards where the trail was, I suddenly found it, but by now it was just about dark. I started, nevertheless, afraid that I might freeze to death if I didn't get off that peak. I went down 1 foot at a time, and then I came to a place where it was a corner with a rock jagging out, and I banged my knee against the rock, and I could hardly move it. I crawled back to the top of Whiteface Mountain, found a lean-to with no roof on it. It was ruined, but I decided to push some leaves over me and go to sleep there, wearing nothing but a light windbreaker, nylon windbreaker. I couldn't start a fire because my matches were all wet, but I made it through the night. The next day, my knee was better. It wasn't hurting anymore. I started down the mountain, and it was a sheer drop, almost straight down the mountain, and that rock that I banged my knee on, the rock was nowhere to be seen.
And so you made it out. I'm going to thank you, Jan, for those stories. Also, I'm going to ask you as we close the show, if you just sit up a little bit and take a look out there and to our folks. This has been Jan Tavelin, and I'm Dick Wolf. This is the County Buzz. If you're watching us on Comcast Channel 3, you can catch us later at another time on our Facebook page or on YouTube. So, Jan is waving his finger at me. What, Jan?
One more.
You better be quick.
Back to Whiteface Mountain. How you interpret it depends upon the individual. Some people say it was extrasensory perception. Some people say it was sheer luck. Some people say it was divine intervention because it wasn't my time to go.
And it's not, but it is our time to go. Thank you very much for watching.